Welcome to Inspired Life. This is where our focus is really partnering together to step into our spiritual journey and deeply experience God's presence in our daily life. And so today, we're gonna kind of excited to talk to you about the ending of the month of Adar in preparation for the next month, which this year happens to be the second month of Adar.
2 months.
So anyways, but it is kind of cool. So from sundown, Sunday night to sundown, we enter the month of Adar 2, or the second Adar, Adar part 2, whatever you want to call it. But it's a time when God really desires to connect with us, the Rosh Hodesh, and he's asking us to give him the first fruits of our time, our devotion, and to really set apart the first day of the month so that he can bless the rest of the days. And, we talked about what God's blessing really is. God's blessing is really giving us what we need, not necessarily what we want. And so that's why that's always kind of one of those tricky places to navigate. But we just want to encourage you to be intentional about recognizing this rhythm, right? We're not under the law, but the practice of it, the benefit of it, right? This isn't the path in and of itself, but it is a pathfinder. In other words, a path that leads us to the path, which is God. And so just be intentional somehow about recognizing this rhythm, creating space to connect with God in your own special, personal way.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot to share with you today about the deep history of this month and also the power that comes from aligning with it. So we will start, as we do, with the Rosh Hodesh blessing. I'm not going to even attempt it in Hebrew. We're still working on that. So I'm just going to say it in English. But may it be your will, Lord our God and God of our fathers, that you renew for us a good month in our Lord Yeshua, the Messiah. Amen.
Amen. So welcome to the 13th month on the Hebrew calendar. Yes, this year is a leap year and we get 2 months of Adar. So it's 5784 is the year, and there's many endings on the calendar, which I think is really cool how God does it. So we are ending a calendar year in one sense, but there's 2 others, that'll come later. But this is amazing. So we end this year, and this one we have 13 months. And basically, in order to ensure that the seasonally based Jewish calendar, it continues to have all the holidays in it in the right place, then the rabbis developed a system over time that allowed them to coordinate the lunar months with the solar year by inserting a leap year. And it's a leap month into that year, and it's at the end of the year. It happens 7 times in every 19-year cycle. So I don't even know. I don't think it goes like every 2 years. It's not like that. It's just 7 times in every 19-year cycle. So here we are. And
we're learning this with you.
We are totally learning this with you. So the interesting thing is in the month of Adar, the 14th day of the last month, it represents the holiday of Purim. It's a very special time. It's celebrated the month before Passover. So in a leap year, Purim is celebrated in the second Adar. Yeah. So really, this is so interesting. Yeah. Adar 1 is the extra month. They put the month in before. Yeah, I didn't recognize that or know that. And it's so cool to think that during Purim and Passover, we celebrate God's deliverance of his people. Mm-hmm. And that's why Adar is considered one of the happiest months in the Jewish year, in the Hebrew calendar. So it is written in the Talmud, when Adar comes, joy is increased. So this is the month of joy. So it's also the month to prepare for the Passover season. And we're ending a winter season, and we're entering into a new spring season, which represents new life. Yeah. So it's the endings and the beginnings. Yeah.
So as we mentioned previously on our teaching on Adar, Adar is connected to the tribe of Naphtali, which can mean sweetness to me. His name actually means my struggle. We'll get to that in a moment. But Jacob's last words to his son Naphtali were, "Naphtali is a deer let loose." He uses beautiful words. he had the ability to bring forth beautiful words. And this is very interesting because his name means struggle. And as I shared on the last live about the butterfly caterpillar story, it was the struggle, right, that squeezed the moisture from the butterfly's wings as he emerged from the cocoon that actually allowed him to become the beautiful butterfly that he did. Without that struggle, his wings were shriveled and he never flew. Yeah. So beautiful words have a connection to our communication. And this is why the adversary will so often try to use our own words against us. And so making your communication aligned with what God says is true is key to moving into the new place that God has for you. It has to do with speaking truth, right? Living in the truth and not speaking curses over yourselves or others. It's just, the thing is, the enemy works from the outside in. This is why the words we speak aloud become internalized unless we guard our hearts against it. And so Adar is kind of a moment to intentionally celebrate the curses that have been and will be overturned in your life. It's kind of exciting, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been talking all month about this theme of celebrating endings, right? And so it's really taking a moment to consider and think about, what has God brought to an end in your life? And it's easy to think of that time as being always sad. And in reality, it's not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, our childhood had to end in order to become an adult, right? And so it's just different. I look at it very much like Landry. Every season raising, that she's 19 now, every season has brought with it its own challenges and its own joy, right? So yeah, there's things I miss about the 5-year-old Landry, but there's things that are awesome about the 19-year-old Landry. So every season comes to an end so that another one can enter in, and there's new joys to experience in that new season.
Absolutely. Yeah. We had an amazing alignment call last night with our Inspired Life members, and we were talking about this very thing, right? And I found that so much insight and clarity comes when I'm able to process this with people instead of just moving through the months and missing what God is doing simply because life just keeps moving.
Yeah.
And we were all sharing, like, sometimes it's like, oh, we have to stop for a minute and write some things down and really connect to this. But wow, it's so powerful when you stop and look first and you recognize all the good that happened, because we tend to gloss over that when we're just surviving and moving forward. But also when you get to reflect back like that and process it, you get to really get clarity on, wow, all that together really created.
And you think about a lot of stuff that happens in the month. Like last night, I realized, wow, it's actually hard to think about what even happened last month.
Yeah.
Until you start intentionally going down and writing down and working through it. And then you go, oh my gosh, there's a lot of great stuff that happened.
So much happened.
And sometimes it's not always great, but I think that processing through it, you have to acknowledge it and name it and process through it to get to the other side. And if you don't, then it just sort of sits there and stacks. And then you have month after month. And wow, it's January again and a whole new year, before you know it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing because we've talked about this, that the Adar is the month of joy, and that we get 2 months of that, right? It's a pregnant month. So we get this double portion of joy. And you get also a second chance to finish anything that you didn't finish in the first month. It's kind of like an added bonus time. Yeah, added bonus time. It's connected to Pisces. That's the constellation that it's connected to. And this I love. It's about finding supply in the spiritual world. So this is the month to overturn worry through release of supply. And it's interesting because it can be difficult to imagine that, but we got to flip that. And when we trust in that and believe in that, the supply comes, right? It's not like the opposite when you think, well, when I have, I'll be secure. It's the opposite. It's finding that security in knowing and then being able to receive.
Yeah.
to be able to receive that supply. So what we want to do is we want to repent from agreeing with a spirit of doubt or anxiety. That's what we get to do. We have a promised supply, and it's a month to break through any roots of depression and despair, because there is a spirit of death over in the world right now over us. And it's a spiritual battle. For me, this is an intense spiritual battle, it feels like, that I've had in my lifetime. Like when I think about the world and all that's going on, and we know that Satan's goal is death, right? He wants death over us, this emotional death, despair, despondence, a death of dreams, a death of hopes. So it's also a death over your destiny, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel despondent too. I realized in one of the things that I was sharing last night in doing this work this month is that there was a place that I just decided that there was a numbness to actually being passionate and excited about something. And I feel like I naturally was that. And it was recognizing this month, wow, that has really been taken. I have allowed it to go. And I really was like, I don't want to be that way anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be back to the way God designed me, which was to have a passion and an excitement over the great expectancy of where God is taking us, even though it can feel sometimes dark and in the present, right? And in our physical eyes, what we see. So it's very interesting because we talk in here a lot about alignment, about a rhythm, finding that rhythm and alignment. And we know for us, it started with us practicing Sabbath rest. And also one of the things that we've been doing in my word for this year is dominion rest. And so what we want to do is wish for you and to start thinking about even what that word means. And it's really the shalom that you feel when you're stepping into your calling. It's that you fought through and you've slayed the giants that have been against you, are pressing you, and you're stepping forward with confidence. Think of David. As he's going to battle in the Psalms, he's talking about being surrounded on all sides, and he really expresses those things to God, but he always is able to land very firmly and solidly on the ground that he knows that God is his rock and that God is his strength, his everything. And to me, that feels a lot like that rest that you find when you're stepping in. I don't want to be numb. I don't want to miss that.
Right.
So it's about stepping into that. And I love that that feels connected to where we are.
Yeah, and it is. And this is the beautiful thing about, I think, the way that God works is everything's connected.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
We may not always understand the connection and we may not always see it, but there isn't any, it isn't like God has random moments, right? And just stuff happens. It doesn't have any meaning at all. It just happens. That's never the way God works. But Purim, I think, deserves special mention because of what it represents. It lands, we mentioned earlier that it lands in the month preceding Passover. So it's celebrated in the second Adar. And this year, the 14th of Adar falls on March 24th. Purim means dice. And so in the story of Esther, the evil Haman, kind of in the spirit of the Antichrist, right, moving against, used the dice to set a date for the extermination of the Jews from the Persian Empire. Again, not just he wanted to take out Mordecai, he wanted to take out all of the Jews. The dice landed on the 13th, and so the date slated for the destruction of the Jews became the 13th of Adar. And it's kind of interesting. You think about, the dice also being used to divide Jesus' clothing, right? He's being put on the execution stake to die for the sins of the world. Of course, the Roman soldiers don't know that. They just see, this Jewish preacher who doesn't seem to have any power, who's now being crucified. And so there's kind of an interesting, I think, just the way that the dice are used to, and of course, they think one thing and it's entirely something else. And I think that it's just kind of funny how that's always used. But everything that was set up, that was established to destroy the Jewish people, to take them out by the signature of King Ahasuerus, is actually used against them. It's kind of funny. So Queen Esther's uncle Mordecai informs her that she has been placed here in the king's palace for exactly such a time as this. And so because of that, she needs to put her life on the line, approach the king, and tell him of Haman's plan. And again, this is because unless the king's scepter was extended to you, you could be executed. So she's just taking it on faith that his scepter will be extended to her when she comes in, because the king did not know that she was Jewish.
Right.
And it's an incredible story. And so miraculously, the king, in his great love for her, stopped the executions of the Jewish people.
Amazing.
And of course, now the king's wrath is turned towards those that sought the destruction of Esther and the other Jewish people. So through Esther, God delivers the Jews, and the very gallows that Haman had prepared for Mordecai and all the Jewish people become the instrument of his own downfall. The gallows are a little bit, there's sort of an English translation of those. It's actually a stake that you're mounted on, and it's a gruesome way to die. It's also a way that really they viewed it as a way of even heaping more dishonor on the person.
Wow.
Right. So part of it was, yes, it was an excruciating, gruesome way to die, but also back in that culture, it was a way to kind of even shower more disdain on the bodies that were being placed there.
Wow.
So the next day, the 14th, becomes the day of celebration, right? This is when according to history, Haman's sons were executed. But Adar means strength. And it's kind of cool how the story of Esther is happening right in the middle of this month.
Yeah.
It's a story of strength. It's a story of faith. And her story is filled with favor, right? She was positioned by God's favor to save the Jewish people. By God's favor, she stepped up to the task.
Yeah.
And by God's favor, she was successful. And then through her, all of the Jewish people enjoyed God's favor. And so think about it this way. What mantle has God given you right now in this moment? The joy of the month of Adar is what makes this, they call it the pregnant month, right? Because there's something that's being ready to be birthed. And so this year is, as we mentioned, the double blessing.
Yeah, the double portion. And I think that's a beautiful thing to think about, is what is the mantle that God has given you? And it's connected to, experiencing the rest of knowing that and stepping into that.
Right.
And that's what we love about this community, is that we are literally here to help you connect to that and to provide inspiration and connection and support as you do that. So this month is to celebrate endings in your life. And the reason that's so important is because that allows us to fully embrace new beginnings. And we believe that part of celebrating endings is learning how to process them in an emotionally healthy way.
Yeah.
And like Dan was saying earlier, it's kind of like what we talk about grief. Grief is conflicting feelings caused by the end of a familiar pattern of behavior. So when something is ending, even if it's good or happy, there's still a change, right? And change is always kind of conflicting. It's always a little bit like you're unsure, you're not, there's that doubt or whatever rises up. So what we want to do is help each other, and as we do it too, learn everything we can from all that we are experiencing. And knowing this alignment, because God has cycles in the earth realm to draw forth your identity. Every year we get to cycle through those same familiar seasons, but every year you and we are all in a different place.
And we go deeper into our identity.
We totally go deeper into it. Remember that you are a new creation. And this month in particular is connected to the opposite of worry and anxiety. It's about supply and abundance. So we want to focus on what we desire. You get more of what you focus on. So be intentional about who you are daily, because honestly, you already are.
Right.
You are creating yourself daily. What are you creating? What mindset are you living in? If you're not careful, the giants in your life will produce fear in you and stop your forward movement. And a good way to do that is to talk about it, is to share about it, get it out of here so that you can really fill that with the positive.
Yeah.
Flipping.
And that's really just about centering on what does God say is true about you.
Exactly.
We're called children of God. That means you're a son or a daughter of God.
Yeah.
That means that the God of the oceans calls you his friend. I mean, there is we need to think about who we are and whose we are, right? That's the process. And so this is the last month of the Hebrew calendar. Next month, we move into spring and into the new calendar, which starts with Passover. So think about that. God begins with the liberation of his people.
Yeah.
The first month, Nisan, that we'll be moving into begins by his people being taken out of bondage. That's literally how they measure their calendar. And so every month from then is like, oh, this is the second month out of bondage. This is the third month out of bondage. It's kind of like the standard by which all of their other months are measured by, right?
Totally.
And so it's really a time for leadership to awaken. God is determining the times and the seasons. Our job is to align with them, right? That's why the enemy is always trying to change the times and the seasons to get us out of, in other words, imagine if you went to sleep tonight and the enemy sets your clock ahead 5 hours. And now you're showing up to work 4 hours early.
Or late,
right?
Or late.
Depending on how he's setting your clock, right? It's getting you out of that alignment, right? And so this is one of the most effective tools is using time to get us out of that alignment. That's why God is always trying to help us understand the importance and value of time, as well as how time is counted. So through that, we understand the tribes, the months, so that we can recognize and then align with his cycles. When we're in God's alignment, then we can avoid the enemy's tactics to interrupt us. And his greatest tactic, probably his greatest tactic of all, is distraction.
Yeah.
The more we're distracted, the more we keep questioning our worth, the more we question our value. But when we stay in alignment, we move on from one blessing to the next. Again, God's blessing is always giving us what we need, right? Not necessarily what we want. And so then we go into the next place that he's taking us. And that's really how we want to close out the year. We want to process through the previous year, and we want to be ready to move into our next dimension of blessings. Our time is truly in his hands, and we are moving supernaturally to where he has planned for us, where he has prepared for us.
Yeah, and I love this idea that we're in this preparation phase, right? We're in this month. Imagine that we're preparing for liberation. Can you imagine if the Israelites knew that they were about to be set free? They're in Egypt for so long, and they had no idea that a month from now they were going to be taken out. And how would you prepare for that? How would you even think about
seriously,
that?
That is a great question. So just take a minute and marinate on that for a second.
How would you even prepare?
How would you prepare?
And I love, because since we started really following this, what we're about to go into is how God was so tender and compassionate to his people after he delivered them. He took them through the 40 days in the desert. And I never really fully understood how important that time was until I really started to learn those months and what he was showing them, who he is, because they didn't know him. They knew of him. An intellectual knowing, right? So we are so excited to step into that season together. And we want to make the most of this extra month to really prepare for spring, right?
Yeah.
Passover begins on April 22nd. And then we begin counting the Omer on the 23rd, that first day, that next day after. So we want to encourage you over this month to really think about, be intentional about thinking about what are the endings that God is bringing in your life. Some of them might be sad. Some of them, I feel like God is ending some of my very deepest negative thoughts and patterns and agreements. And he's clearly saying these aren't going to go with you where I'm going to take you. And I feel a lot of excitement about that. And I'm excited about sharing all of that. So you won't need those things in the next season. What is God taking out? What is he ending?
Yeah.
Sometimes you think about a friend like that's beating up someone that's picking on you, right? It's kind of like that. But
Yeah.
we're so excited about that. And we love counting the Omer. And that's, if you have never done that before, it's so powerful to see because God literally shows up every day talking. There's so much on the daily that we do when we're counting the Omer. So we can't wait to share about that. Also, next week, we're super excited because we are going to do a deep dive into, that God speaks to us through his stars, the moon, the sun, all these things. And we are heading into a big eclipse on April 8th. And we are very excited to share with you what we are learning about that next week. So next Friday, we're going to be doing that. So hopefully we'll see you there. Have a beautiful and blessed weekend.
Yes, we are wishing you a early Shabbat Shalom.
Yes. So take care, you guys. See you next time.
All right. Bye, all.